What if you had nothing to eat, no one to turn to, and the only person around was the richest man alive? The night air was colder than usual, biting through the layers of mismatched clothes she wore like it had an agenda. Skye Miller had learned to keep moving even when her body screamed for rest. Alleys, overpasses, bus stations, none of them were warm, but they were familiar. That night she passed a high-end Los Angeles restaurant she'd lingered near before, not to beg, not to steal, but just to feel something normal again. The warm glow inside, people laughing, silverware clinking, jazz music drifting out the window, it was like watching a life she might have lived in another universe. She stood near the dumpster, not quite in it, not quite away from it, waiting to see if the staff would bring out bags of waste, maybe with a half-eaten sandwich or forgotten fries. That's when the black Tesla pulled up. The driver didn't get out. He didn't have to. A tall man stepped out, casually dressed in a hoodie and jeans. She knew that face. Everyone did. Elon Musk. He walked straight into the restaurant without looking her way. She didn't move. It felt like watching a ghost. Not that he was dead, but because billionaires didn't exist in her world. They belonged on magazine covers, not sidewalks. She turned to leave, but something stopped her. Hunger. Raw, humiliating hunger that knotted her stomach and stripped away the last sliver of pride she clung to. She didn't plan it. Her feet just moved. Her voice came out before her brain could stop it. "Can I eat your leftovers?" The words hung in the air, ridiculous and pathetic and loud in her own ears. Elon turned around slowly, confused at first, like maybe he hadn't heard her right. Then he looked at her, really looked. Disheveled hair. Torn jacket. Shoes that didn't match. He didn't smile. He didn't laugh. He just stared, and for a second, she regretted everything. Then he spoke. "You hungry?" She blinked. Was that sarcasm? A joke? She nodded. "Yeah. I'm hungry." He looked down the alley, then back at her. "Come inside. I'll get you something real. Not leftovers." She froze. Her instinct screamed no. Go back to the shadows. Stay invisible. But her stomach screamed louder. She followed. Inside, the maitre d' gave her a look like she was a stray dog tracking mud on marble. Elon didn't flinch. "It's fine," he said. "She's with me." They sat at a table in the back. She didn't know where to look. She didn't know what to say. People stared. Of course they did. Elon Musk, sitting with a homeless girl in a five-star restaurant. The waiter hesitated, then handed her a menu with a trembling hand. She didn't know how to read it. Not because she couldn't read, she could, but because none of the words looked like food she'd ever eaten. "I don't care what it is," she said softly. "Just something warm." Elon nodded. "Get her the steak and soup," he told the waiter. "And an extra bread basket." She waited for the lecture. The backstory inquiry. The pity. But he said nothing. Just sat there, sipping water, like this was normal. Finally, she couldn't take the silence. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He leaned back in his chair, considering. "Because I used to be hungry," he said. "And someone helped me. And because it's weirdly refreshing to be asked something honest." The food came. She ate like it was her last meal. He didn't comment. He just watched, like he was trying to understand something beyond what was in front of him. When she slowed down, he asked, "What's your name?" "Skye," she mumbled, mouth still full. "Skye what?" "Miller." "Skye Miller." He nodded like he was filing that away. "You live around here?" She laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "If you mean under the freeway, then yeah. I live real close." He didn't laugh. "How long?" 2 years. Since I was 15. What happened? She froze. There it was. The question everyone eventually asked. She put down her fork. Mom OD'd. Dad took off before that. Foster care didn't work out. It never does. I ran. He nodded again, slower this time. That's a lot. Yeah, she said. It is. They sat in silence again. She wanted to leave, but something told her this moment wasn't over. Not yet. Elon leaned forward. What did you want to be? Before? She blinked. What makes you think I wanted to be anything? Everyone wants to be something. She hesitated. An aerospace engineer. I liked space. That got a smile out of him. Really? She nodded, embarrassed. Yeah. I used to read books about Mars. I watched videos about rocket fuel and stuff. It was stupid. It's not stupid, he said. It's not stupid at all. She looked at him, eyes narrowing. Are you gonna offer me a job or something? He didn't smile this time. No. That's not how it works. I'm not here to save you, Sky. That stung. Then why are you here? Because you asked me a question no one's ever asked me before. You didn't ask for money. You didn't ask for a favor. You asked if you could eat my leftovers. That's real. That's raw. She looked down. It was pathetic. It was honest. More silence. She felt full, but also hollow. Like the food filled her belly but emptied her soul. So what now? She asked. Now, he repeated. He took out a business card, scribbled something on the back, and slid it across the table. That's an address. A shelter I helped fund. They've got beds. Show them this. They'll take you in. You decide what comes after that. She stared at the card like it was a map to a different world. Why me? Why not you? He asked. She didn't know what to say. Eventually she stood up. Thanks. For the food. He nodded. Sky, he said before she turned. This doesn't have to be your ending. Sometimes, the right question is the start of something bigger. She nodded and walked out. Back into the cold. Back into uncertainty. But this time, she had something in her pocket other than lint and despair. She had a name, an address, a possibility. She didn't know if it would change anything. But for the first time in years, she felt like it could. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? She never thought her name would matter to anyone. Sky Miller was just another shadow drifting through Los Angeles, just another teenager swallowed up by the city's endless hunger. Even when she still had a home, her life was already cracked. Her mother used to call her Sky Blue, whispering it like a lullaby when she came home late from working double shifts at a rundown diner. Sky remembered those nights when the electricity would go out, and her mom would light candles and pretend it was a campout. They'd eat canned beans and crackers on the floor, telling stories about what they'd do if they had $1 million. Sky always said the same thing, she'd build a rocket and fly to Mars. Her mom would smile, tuck her in, and say, shoot higher than they say you can. It was all pretend. The lights never came back on fast enough. Her mom started sleeping more, working less. Then came the pills. Then the silence. Sky found her lying on the bathroom floor one morning, the water in the sink still running, the bottle of pills tipped over like a warning sign no one had read. The social worker told Sky she was strong. They all say that. They don't mean it. What they mean is survivable. Sky bounced through 3 foster homes in a single year. The first one made her scrub baseboards and wash cars for hours, and called it, building character. The second one locked up the fridge and fed her once a day. The third one had a teenage son who stared too long, stood too close. That was the one she ran from. She was 15. She took a backpack, her mom's old phone with no service, and a crumpled dollar bill. The streets didn't welcome her, but they didn't push her away either. There's a system on the street, a brutal kind of order. Keep moving. Don't ask questions. Sleep in groups if you can. Don't look weak. Don't owe anyone. If someone offers help, they want something. Always. She learned how to blend in. How to make herself invisible. She spent days at the public library just to charge the dead phone, even though it didn't work anymore. Sometimes she opened the calculator app and typed in math problems from the old science textbooks, just to remind herself she still knew how to think. At night she found places with cameras, ATMs, gas stations, parking garages, anywhere she might be seen if something went wrong. Once, a man offered her $20 to get in his car. She said no. He didn't take it well. She ran, hard and fast, ducking into a CVS and hiding behind shelves of allergy meds until he gave up. After that, she stopped trusting anyone. Trust was a luxury. Still, there were rare moments when she remembered she used to be someone. She used to dream. At the shelter she visited once a week for showers, she saw a poster about a scholarship for a girls' STEM program. It had pictures of smiling girls building robots and launching tiny rockets. She took a picture of it. She didn't know why. Maybe she liked the way it looked. Maybe she needed to remember that some girls got to live that life. Sometimes she passed the SpaceX building, peering through the gates like a kid at Disneyland. She wondered what it would feel like to belong somewhere with smart people who looked up at the stars instead of down at the sidewalk. But that wasn't her life. Her life was soup kitchens, bus benches, and figuring out which fast food bathrooms didn't lock the doors. Her life was hunger and cold and the constant noise of a city that never shut up. Then came the night with Elon. It felt unreal, like a fever dream she might wake up from in a pile of trash. But the card he gave her was still in her pocket. She pulled it out a dozen times that night just to make sure it hadn't evaporated. The next morning she walked to the address. Her heart raced the whole way. What if they turned her away? What if it was a trick? What if she showed them the card and they laughed at her? But they didn't. The woman at the desk, middle-aged, gray streak in her hair, kind eyes, read the scribbled note on the back of the card and smiled. "Follow me, sweetheart," she said. "We've got a bed open." The room was plain. Twin mattress, clean sheets, small locker. Sky stared at it like it was a museum exhibit. Her own bed. Her own pillow. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried in a long time. But she sat on the edge of that bed and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for 2 years. The woman's name was Carol. She said she ran the women's section of the shelter and didn't care what the tabloids said. "You're here now," she said. "What you do with that is up to you." Sky spent the next 3 days sleeping more than she thought humanly possible. She didn't speak much to the other girls, not at first. Trust takes time. But she observed. Most of them had stories like hers, loss, betrayal, pain. Some were young like her. Some were moms. Some never talked at all. On the 4th day, Carol knocked on her door with a plastic bag of toiletries and a set of clothes. "You've got a visitor," she said. Sky blinked. "Who?" Carol shrugged. "Man in a baseball cap. Said he's a friend." She panicked. Was it her dad? One of the Foster families? But when she walked into the lobby, she saw Elon Musk, dressed like a tourist, cap pulled low, sunglasses on. He held out a paper cup. "I brought coffee," he said. Hope you're not one of those no caffeine people. She didn't take it. What are you doing here? He smiled. Just checking in. Wanted to make sure you made it. She folded her arms. Why do you care? Because I want to see what happens next, he said. You said you liked space. She rolled her eyes. That doesn't mean I'm gonna be an astronaut now. I know, he said. But maybe you want to come visit SpaceX. See what we're working on. No strings attached. Why? She asked again, her voice low. Why me? He tilted his head. Because you remind me of someone. Someone I used to be. And because if you don't get a shot, then what's the point of any of this? She didn't answer right away. Finally, she took the coffee. It was hot and bitter, just how she liked it. I'll think about it, she said. He nodded. That's all I ask. When he left, Carol raised an eyebrow. So, she said. Want to tell me what's going on? Sky shook her head. Not yet. That night, she stayed up staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of other girls breathing. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder if this was real. If maybe, just maybe, she wasn't doomed to disappear. If maybe her name, Sky Miller, meant something after all. The night before she met Elon Musk, Sky didn't sleep. She spent it wandering the blocks between Santa Monica and downtown, weaving through sidewalks sticky with spilled drinks and littered with half-smoked cigarettes. Her jacket, once black, was now a faded gray with frayed sleeves and a broken zipper that flapped open when the wind blew too hard. The concrete beneath her thin sneakers seemed colder than usual, like the whole city had decided it was done pretending to care. It wasn't just cold, it was punishing, the kind of cold that reminded her bones she didn't belong out here. She pulled her hood tighter and ducked into a bus shelter just before sunrise, curling up on the bench and pretending to wait for a ride. She wasn't really waiting for anything. When she closed her eyes, she saw her mom again, sitting cross-legged on their old couch, drawing stars on a notepad with a cheap blue pen, telling Sky that everything above them was possible if she kept dreaming. That image always came back to her when she was hungriest, like her mind thought hope could replace food. She woke up shivering, wiped the condensation off her cheeks, and headed toward the rich part of the city. She didn't like going there. The stairs were worse. People walked faster, tighter, clutching their bags like she was a threat. But the restaurants threw out the best scraps. That day she made it to a corner she liked, near a French place that tossed out crusty baguettes and overcooked vegetables right around closing. She watched from the alley, leaning against a dumpster, trying not to look desperate even though she was. She'd already checked the other bins. Nothing edible. Someone else had beaten her to them. So she waited, stomach twisting, eyes stinging. The sound of laughter came from the restaurant's patio, bright, polished voices talking about stocks and Teslas and art galleries. The door opened, and a waiter carried out a black trash bag. She tensed, ready to move, but stopped when she saw the bag was tied too tight and clearly full of wet garbage. Not food. Her stomach cramped again. She hadn't eaten since a banana 2 days ago that had brown spots and was so soft it collapsed in her hand. She leaned her head back against the wall and whispered, "Okay, universe. I get it." And that's when she saw him. Elon. She recognized him instantly, but it felt like recognizing a character from a TV show, not someone who should be walking right in front of her. He looked tired. Not in a sad way, but in a deep thinking, barely slept kind of way. He wore jeans and a hoodie, and his car, a sleek black Tesla, sat at the curb like it belonged to a different planet. He glanced around, distracted, then walked into the restaurant like he'd done it 100 times. She didn't know what possessed her to follow. Maybe she thought someone like him wouldn't notice. Maybe she thought there was still a chance some food would come out if she waited near the back. She wasn't thinking clearly. She just felt like she couldn't walk anymore. Her legs didn't want to go anywhere else. Minutes passed. Her hunger got worse. Her pride, which used to sit high in her chest, had sunk somewhere behind her ribs, where it couldn't scream as loud. She saw Elon through the window, eating something that smelled like roasted chicken and butter. He was alone, focused on his phone, barely touching his plate. The moment hit her like lightning. What if I just ask? Just once. The worst he can do is say no. Or laugh. Or ignore me. But maybe, just maybe, he'd say yes. And so she stepped toward the patio entrance, stood just outside the glass railing, and said it without thinking. Can I eat your leftovers? She almost didn't hear herself say it. The words came out choked, like they didn't want to be born. Elon looked up. At first, his eyes were blank, trying to place what he was hearing. Then he turned fully, staring at her like she wasn't real. Time froze. She felt her throat go dry. Her legs screamed to run, to disappear into the alley and forget this ever happened. But he didn't look angry. He didn't look amused. He just looked curious. You hungry? He asked. The way he said it wasn't pitying. It wasn't judgmental. It was like he genuinely wanted to know. She nodded. That was it. No dramatic explanation. No sob story. Just truth. He stood up and gestured. Come on. Let's get you something real. She hesitated, heart slamming in her chest. This couldn't be happening. Was he serious? Was this some kind of test? But he didn't look back. He just walked into the restaurant and waited for her to follow. And she did. Everything after that moved in a blur. The host tried to stop her. Elon waved him off. She sat across from him at a booth with soft leather seats that made her feel like she didn't belong. The menu had no pictures. The words were foreign, French maybe, or something fancier. Elon asked what she wanted. She said, something warm. That was it. He ordered steak and soup and extra bread. When the food came, she couldn't help herself. She ate fast, cheeks burning with shame, eyes darting around, waiting for someone to tell her to leave. But no one did. Elon didn't flinch. He just watched her with a kind of quiet fascination, like she was solving a puzzle he didn't know existed. What's your name? He asked. Sky, she said. Sky Miller. He nodded. That's a good name. She shrugged. It's just a name. Nah, he said. Sky's a name people remember. She didn't know how to respond. She kept eating, slower now, trying not to look like she was starving even though she was. He asked questions, basic ones. Where she was from. How long she'd been on the streets. What she used to like in school. She answered carefully. She wasn't used to being seen like this. At one point, she said, "You're not gonna post this, are you? Like, make a video or something?" He looked surprised. No. Why would I do that? Because everyone wants views. Viral moments. Homeless girl meets billionaire, it's good for clicks. I'm not interested in clicks, he said. I'm interested in people. She stared at him. You really believe that? I have to, he said. Otherwise none of this matters. She finished her soup. He handed her a business card. If you want help, real help, go here. They know you're coming. She held the card like it might disappear if she blinked. You're serious. I wouldn't waste your time if I wasn't. She stood slowly, her legs stiff. Thanks, she said, voice low. For not treating me like trash. Sky, he said, just before she turned. You asked me something no one else ever has. That matters. She nodded and stepped outside, back into the night. The cold didn't feel so sharp anymore. Not because it had warmed up, but because for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. She was still hungry for more than food. She was hungry for a chance. A door had opened. She didn't know where it led, or if she deserved to walk through it. But the card in her hand felt heavier than it should have. Like it carried something bigger than directions. Like it carried possibility. Elon Musk had conversations every day that blurred into background noise. Boardroom briefings, launch schedules, patent requests, satellite networks, media questions, investor pitches, crisis calls, and ideas pitched at such a frantic pace that most people couldn't keep up. But that one sentence, "Can I eat your leftovers?" It hadn't just cut through the noise, it had carved out a place in his brain he couldn't shake loose. He found himself thinking about the girl, Sky Miller, long after she walked away from the table, gripping that card like it was made of gold instead of cheap paper stock. There was something in her eyes that reminded him of his own reflection when he first landed in America with a student visa and 2 duffel bags. She looked like someone who had learned early that the world owed her nothing and was probably going to collect on that debt anyway. His assistant didn't understand why he was late the next morning. He didn't explain. He just cancelled a meeting, pulled up the address of the shelter he'd helped fund through one of his foundations, and made a quiet call. Told them to expect a girl named Sky, possibly wearing 2 different shoes, possibly wary of everyone. No questions, he said. Give her a bed, a meal, and a quiet space. Treat her like a guest, not a case. That wasn't the strange part. Elon had donated to hundreds of causes, signed checks that saved programs in hospitals and solar research labs. But this wasn't about a cause. It wasn't philanthropy. It was personal. Later that day, during a tech meeting about satellite re-entry mechanics, he found himself scribbling on his notepad instead of paying attention. He drew the shape of a rocket, then a circle around it. Then a name, Skypod. Something clicked. Not just about a girl, but about a problem. One of the biggest gaps in American cities was transitional shelter. Homeless shelters were overcrowded, underfunded, and often dangerous. He'd read reports of people sleeping in tents inches from sidewalks, exposed to crime, heat, rain, humiliation. It made no sense in a world that could land rockets on barges. What if there was a compact, low-cost, solar-powered personal pod, something between a tent and a cabin, lightweight, durable, insulated, stackable, mass-producible? Something that could pop up in vacant lots and emergency zones, offering real shelter and dignity. It wasn't just a good idea. It was scalable. It was necessary. He scribbled more. Shapes, specs, materials. Then he stopped. Was he getting carried away? Was this just emotional whiplash from a girl who reminded him what it meant to need something as basic as food? But no, this was bigger. It was logic and empathy colliding into action. He called his private team, a small group of trusted engineers and designers, and told them to set aside their next 2 weeks. We're working on something new, he said. It's not going to space. But it might change lives on the ground. Some rolled their eyes. Elon did this sometimes, chased a new obsession, dove into it with tunnel vision, flipped priorities overnight. But they also knew when he got that tone in his voice, it usually meant he saw a future they didn't yet understand. Meanwhile, across town, Sky was waking up in a real bed. Not a borrowed couch. Not a bench. Not the cold earth under an overpass. An actual bed, with clean sheets and a pillow that smelled like lavender instead of mildew and asphalt. Her first instinct was to panic. She had woken up in strange places before and none of them had ever turned out good. But then her eyes adjusted to the gentle morning light coming through the small window, and she remembered. The shelter. The card. Elon. It hadn't been a dream. She sat up, dazed, muscles stiff from tension that hadn't learned how to let go yet. Her backpack sat on the floor next to the bed, its zipper half broken. Inside it was everything she owned, a notebook with ripped pages, a few dollar bills folded into the corner of a sock, her mom's broken flip phone, a pen that barely worked, and the photo she kept in a sandwich bag, the one of her and her mom at a bus stop, both of them smiling like they didn't know what was coming. She grabbed the photo and stared at it, heart thumping. Her mom had told her to never be afraid of smart people. "You're one of them," she'd said. "You just haven't had the tools yet." It sounded ridiculous now. But Sky clung to that sentence the way someone might cling to a raft in open water. When Carol knocked on her door, Sky flinched. She was still getting used to people announcing themselves. "Someone left this for you," Carol said through the door. Sky opened it cautiously and accepted a small package, a brown envelope with no label. Inside was a tablet. A new one. Clean. Functional. Fully charged. With a sticky note on the screen. "Sky, if you're curious, here's a digital map of every SpaceX launch since 2008. Thought you might want to explore a bit." That was it. No speech. No push. Just data. Information. Possibility. She sat on the bed and turned it on. The home screen had only 2 apps installed, the map, and a secure chat program. She tapped the map first. For the next 3 hours, she fell down a rabbit hole of timelines, video clips, capsule specs, Mars mission theories, prototype sketches. The names were familiar to her from the library books she used to borrow, but now they came alive: Falcon Heavy, Dragon Crew, Starship, Raptor engines, Artemis Gateway. It wasn't just cool. It was obsession reborn. She felt something shift in her chest, a weight lifting. For the first time since she'd run away from her last foster home, she wanted something again. Really wanted it. She wanted to build. She wanted to learn. She wanted to go somewhere other than survival. The secure chat pinged. One message. Lunch at Hawthorne. Tour included if you're up for it. You pick the time. Her fingers hovered over the keys. This couldn't be real. But it was. A girl who had asked for leftovers was now being invited into a world she used to admire from bus stop posters and grainy YouTube videos. She typed back, "Tomorrow. Noon. 1 word at a time." She didn't want to seem too eager. But her heart was racing. She barely slept that night, though the bed was comfortable. She kept thinking about what she'd wear, what she'd say, what questions she might ask. Should she admit she had once tried to design a rocket from duct tape and cardboard as a school project? Would they laugh at her? Would he? She almost backed out. Twice. But the part of her that had once imagined herself on Mars wouldn't let her. It wasn't about Elon. It wasn't about tech fame. It was about not running anymore. The next day, when a black SUV pulled up to the shelter and a driver stepped out holding a sign with her name, Sky didn't ask questions. She got in, held her breath, and told herself this was just lunch. But deep down, she knew. This wasn't just lunch. This was the beginning of something she couldn't name yet. The SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne didn't look like something out of a movie. At least not from the outside. The building was industrial, wide, solid, built for function. But the second Sky stepped inside, it hit her. This was the beating heart of something unimaginable. Clean white walls, sharp red lines, glass partitions, hums of activity, engineers with tablets pacing past rocket components like it was just another day. No one stared at her, not even when she hesitated near the front desk. The receptionist glanced up, then smiled like she already knew who Sky was. "Mr. Musk is waiting," she said, and handed her a badge that just said guest, Sky. For a second, Sky held it like it might catch fire. She clipped it to her borrowed jacket, the one Carol gave her from the donations bin, and followed the assistant down the main hallway. Elon was standing beside a massive scale model of a launch pad. He looked up when she approached and nodded, casual. "Glad you came," he said. "You ever been in a place like this?" Sky shook her head. "Only in documentaries." "Well," he said, "this one's real. Want to see where we build the future?" She didn't say yes out loud. But her feet moved forward. He led her through the assembly floor. Giant pieces of rocket engines sat on mounted steel arms. The air smelled like metal and machine oil and ozone. Everything looked enormous, like it had been carved by a different species. Elon explained things as they walked, not like he was talking down to her, but like he assumed she could keep up. He pointed to parts of the Raptor engine, showing where the oxidizer flowed, how thrust vectors shifted, how cryogenic methane cooled the chamber before it ignited. She nodded, absorbing every word like a sponge. "We run on iteration," he said. "Failure isn't a stop sign. It's a signal. You fail fast, fix fast, and fly again." She glanced at him. "So failing's okay here?" "It's mandatory," he said. That stayed with her. They passed a team running simulations on a console wall, huge numbers flicking by faster than she could read them. A woman with purple hair and a NASA patch on her sleeve was shouting instructions. Sky wanted to ask her 1,000 questions. Instead, she whispered to Elon, "Do all these people love this?" "The good ones do," he said. "The great ones can't do anything else." They paused in front of a touchscreen display showing past launch footage. Elon swiped to bring up the Falcon 9 landing sequence, one of the early failed attempts. The rocket missed the barge and exploded into a fireball. "That was the third try," he said. People laughed. Said it'd never work. Said I was throwing money into the ocean. You know what I said? Sky looked at him, waiting. He tapped the screen again. "I said, we're just getting started." Then he showed her the successful landing. The rocket touching down like it belonged on Earth all along. The whole room watching on the video had erupted into cheers. Sky watched the screen, transfixed. She felt something twist in her chest. Something heavy and sharp and alive. Hope, maybe. Or longing. Or both. Elon turned to her. "You said you liked space. You ever build anything?" She laughed, but it sounded brittle. "Not like this. I used to build little models. Cardboard ships, water bottle boosters. Dumb stuff." "That's not dumb," he said. "That's engineering with what you have. Most people never even try." "They didn't work," she admitted. "They weren't supposed to yet," he replied. He led her into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows. Lunch was already set on the table, salads, sandwiches, bottled water. Nothing fancy. Sky stared at the food. Her instincts kicked in. Was this too much? Would someone take it away if she hesitated? Elon sat and gestured for her to do the same. "Eat. You're not auditioning." She sat. Ate. Slower this time. Watching him, waiting for the catch. But there wasn't one. Not yet. "I've been thinking," he said as he peeled an orange. "You ever consider going back to school?" She almost choked on a bite of bread. "You mean like, high school? Or GED? Then maybe a tech program? Or community college? Or intern here eventually? There are options." She shook her head. "I can't afford that. I don't even have a permanent address." "That can change," he said. "There's a scholarship fund. A mentorship program. It's under the radar. Meant for edge cases. People who fall through cracks. Like me," she said. "Exactly like you," he replied. "You're smart, Sky. Not just smart, curious. That's rarer. If you want to learn, we'll make it happen." She didn't answer right away. It felt dangerous to want something again. It felt like dangling over a canyon, arms outstretched, hoping someone didn't let go. I don't want pity, she finally said. I don't need saving. Good, he said. We're not in the business of saving anyone. We build things. That includes people, sometimes. She looked down at her plate. What if I screw it up? Then you start again, he said. That's how rockets work. That's how people work too. They finished lunch. He offered to send her back with some books. Not the fluffy ones, he said. Real stuff. Physics, propulsion, systems design. Read what you like. Tell me what you hate. That's part of it too. She nodded, unsure if this was still reality. When they walked back through the floor, some of the engineers glanced up. One of them, an older guy with oil-stained hands, gave her a respectful nod. Just a nod. But it felt like a door opening. Before she left, Elon handed her a plain folder. Inside is a card. It's a private number. Not a hotline, not a foundation. It goes to one person, me. Don't share it. Don't use it unless it matters. And don't let this be the end of your story. She took it. Her hands were shaking. Why are you doing this? She asked. I already told you, he said. You asked me something real. I don't get that a lot. She turned to leave, her heart pounding. Every step out of that building felt heavier than the last. Not because she was scared. But because, for the first time in forever, she wasn't walking away from something. She was walking toward something. The sky outside was bright. Wide open. She tilted her head up and whispered, "Okay, Mom. I'll try." The books arrived in a plain cardboard box, no logos, no return address. Just her name written in clean black marker, Sky. Carol handed it to her with a knowing look but said nothing, just raised an eyebrow like she was proud without needing to say it. Sky carried the box up to her room like it was made of glass. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling as she pulled the lid off. The smell of fresh pages hit her instantly, sharp, inky, and real. Inside were 5 books, each one heavy and dense and unapologetically complicated. Titles like Principles of Rocket Propulsion, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry, Systems Engineering Simplified, and Women in Space, Trailblazers and Technologists. On top, a yellow sticky note with Elon's tiny, slanted handwriting, "Start with the one that scares you. And don't fall asleep on page 5 like I did." She laughed. Actually laughed. For a second, it felt like the air wasn't so heavy. She picked up the propulsion book and flipped to the first chapter. The math hit her like a wall, symbols, numbers, terms she hadn't seen since sophomore science. She shut the book, took a breath, then opened it again. Slower this time. This wasn't a sprint. It was a climb. The first hour, she just read. The second, she Googled definitions and scribbled notes in the battered notebook she'd carried in her backpack for months. By the end of the night, she'd made it through 6 pages and understood maybe 3 of them. But it didn't matter. She'd started. The next few days became routine. Wake up, shower, help clean the shelter common area. Then read. Then write. Then reread. Carol gave her space but always checked in. "You're glowing," she said once, handing Sky a fresh bowl of chili. Didn't know rocket fuel came in book form. Sky smiled but didn't answer. She didn't know how to explain it. She didn't want to break the spell. She felt like she was carrying something fragile and sacred, momentum. A reason. 2 weeks after the tour, the chat app on her tablet pinged again. How's the scary book?" She stared at the message for a full minute before replying. Still scary. But I like it. Good. Want to see a launch? In person? Next week. Vandenberg. We've got a window. You'd be my guest. She didn't even blink before responding. Yes. Carol helped her find decent clothes in the donations room, black jeans, a soft hoodie, and a pair of clean sneakers that actually fit. You look like someone with places to be, Carol said. Because you are. The day of the launch, Sky barely spoke on the ride. A driver picked her up early. She watched the sun rise through the car window as they left the city behind. Vandenberg Space Force Base sat on the cliffs of California's central coast, surrounded by rugged hills and cold ocean wind. It felt like the edge of the world. She was cleared through security quickly, her name already on the list, and escorted to a private viewing area where Elon was waiting with a small group of engineers. He nodded when she arrived. Perfect weather, he said. It's a supply run, but we're testing a new orbital boost. Sky glanced at the pad in the distance. The rocket looked surreal, like something sketched into the horizon by a child with a vivid imagination. She couldn't believe it was real. Couldn't believe she was here. Want to help with pre-check? Elon asked. She blinked. Me? He handed her a tablet. Sim mode only. You won't crash anything. But you'll see what we see. For the next hour, she watched numbers scroll across the screen, checked green boxes next to terms she was just starting to understand: fuel tank pressure, grid fin lock, interstage thermal seal. Her fingers moved with shaky confidence, double-checking each line. Then the countdown started. Everyone grew quiet. 10. 9. 8. Her pulse matched the seconds. The screen flashed into a live feed from the base of the rocket. 3. 2. 1. Ignition. The earth shook. Not violently, more like a deep, grounded roar in her chest. The rocket lifted, flames carving a bright wound into the sky. Sky's eyes followed it upward until it was a speck, then a glint, then gone. She didn't realize she was crying until Elon handed her a tissue. That never gets old, he said. She nodded. It's insane. That we can do this. He turned to her. You could do this. If you want. She laughed, wiping her eyes. You keep saying that. But you barely know me. I know enough, he said. You think like an engineer. You learn fast. And you ask the right question. She shook her head. I asked you for food. And that told me more than a resume ever could, he replied. It told me you weren't afraid to ask when it mattered. That's rare. Especially in this world. The team celebrated quietly, no champagne, just high fives and nods of approval. Sky stood at the railing for a long time, watching the trail of smoke fade into the clouds. She thought about her mom. About the nights they'd look up and talk about the stars. She whispered, "We did it," even though she hadn't done anything yet. Not really. But maybe one day. On the ride back, she stared out the window, thinking. Not about the past. But about what came next. The idea scared her. But for the first time, the fear didn't stop her. It fueled her. Back at the shelter, Carol greeted her with a grin. How was space? Sky hugged her, unexpectedly. Big, she said. And closer than I thought. That night, she opened the propulsion book again. And this time, she didn't stop after 6 pages. She read until her eyes blurred, until the lines of math started to make sense, until the diagrams looked like puzzles she could one day solve. At 3 a.m., the chat pinged again. You still awake? Yeah. Got to the thrust equation. It actually clicked. Told you. That's your first launch. Internal. The rest comes later. Sleep. Tomorrow's another page. She smiled, closed the book, and lay back. The ceiling of her small room felt like a dome. A sky. And she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could reach it. Sky had always associated the word test with failure. Pop quizzes that landed like gut punches. Standardized exams that reminded her she was poor, behind, and out of place. But this one was different. It wasn't about grades. It wasn't for school. It was for a shot. Elon had called it a skills check, something informal. Just a few people in a quiet SpaceX room watching how she solved problems, not whether she solved them perfectly. You'll be fine, he told her over chat. This is about how you think, not what you know. Stay curious. But curiosity didn't stop the nerves. She barely slept the night before. Carol packed her a sandwich and made her promise to breathe. You've already done the hard part, she said. Showing up. Sky rode in the back of the same black SUV, gripping her notebook and wearing the same clean hoodie and jeans that now felt like armor. The SpaceX campus looked familiar now, but that didn't make it less intimidating. The same receptionist greeted her with a nod, and within minutes, she was in a room with 3 engineers, one empty whiteboard, and a table with only 2 things on it, a calculator and a sealed envelope. One of the engineers, a soft-spoken guy named Raj, handed her the envelope. When you're ready, he said. Take your time. No pressure. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a 1-page prompt: design a basic system to land a 2 kg payload safely from 1,000 meters. You may use any method you choose. You have 45 minutes. Draw, explain, calculate. Assume Earth gravity and air resistance. Her throat tightened. For a second, all she saw were numbers. Then she closed her eyes. Took a breath. Thought. If this were a cardboard science fair, what would she do? A parachute. Something to slow descent. But what kind? How big? She moved to the whiteboard and started sketching. Circles, arrows, notations. She wrote G equals 9.8 meters per square second, then estimated drag force using basic equations. She factored in parachute diameter, terminal velocity, and material assumptions. Her hand didn't stop moving. The room was quiet except for the squeak of the marker. She glanced at the clock. Half the time gone. She added alternatives, airbags, retro thrusters, even joked in parentheses about Martian gravity. The engineers cracked half a smile. She detailed weight distribution, calculated estimated landing forces, and finally boxed the result with her best solution: parachute diameter equals 1.65 m, given materials with a drag coefficient of 1.2 and expected descent velocity of 4.5 meters per second. She underlined the note: design depends heavily on available materials and payload fragility. Would prefer test drop simulation before deployment. When she stepped back, her palms were sweaty, but her eyes were clear. For the first time, she wasn't scared of looking wrong. She was proud of thinking it through. One of the engineers stood and clapped once. Nice. Another added, you made assumptions explicit. That's real-world thinking. Raj nodded. We'd like to bring you on. Internship track. It starts part-time, mostly virtual. You'll shadow a propulsion systems mentor. Paid. And if you do well, we can expand it. She stared at them. You're serious? We don't play with this stuff, Raj said. We liked your curiosity. Then we saw your mind work. You've got the spark. She didn't cry until she got back into the car. Then it all hit her. The last 2 years. The hunger. The nights on sidewalks. The feeling that she was invisible. Now here she was, offered a place, even a small one, in a company she used to read about like it belonged in a different galaxy. When she returned to the shelter, Carol was waiting on the porch, arms folded. "Well?" Skye held up the notebook, the one with marker stains and diagrams and equations. "I think I just landed something," she said. Carol whooped, grabbed her, spun her in a hug. "Told you. Told you, girl." They celebrated with microwave popcorn and orange soda in the shelter kitchen, the other women clapping her on the back like she'd just won a lottery. But Skye knew better. This wasn't luck. This was years of survival finally cracking open the door to something bigger. Over the next few weeks, the internship became real. A SpaceX mentor named Letitia emailed her onboarding documents. She helped Skye set up a secure workspace inside the shelter's library room. They sent her a company laptop, a secure login, and a headset. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she logged in for virtual sessions, some training, some problem solving, some fireside chats where Elon would unexpectedly drop in and throw out impossible-sounding questions. "How would you cool an engine chamber on Mars without water?" he asked one day. Most interns froze. Skye raised her hand. "Use CO2 from the Martian atmosphere. Compress it. Phase change cooling system." Elon smiled. "Not bad. Bonus points if you can sketch the heat exchanger." She stayed up until 3 a.m. trying. When she sent in the drawing, Letitia wrote back, "He liked it. You're on his radar now. No pressure." Every day was a challenge. Every day, she doubted herself. Every day, she kept going anyway. There were still hard nights. Sometimes the shelter was loud, or someone new came in screaming, and she had to remember how to calm herself. Sometimes old memories clawed at her, her mom, the nights in foster care, the boyfriend who said she was stupid for liking space. But then she'd look at her desk, her books, the binder of notes she was building like a blueprint for her new life. And she kept going. One Friday afternoon, Elon messaged her directly, "Come to Boca Chica. 3 days. Rocket test. I want you on the floor. Can you make it?" Her hands shook as she typed, "Yes. Absolutely." The shelter staff arranged everything. Elon covered the flight, the hotel, even a new set of clothes. When she stepped onto the tarmac in Texas, the humidity hit her like a wave. But so did the awe. The Starbase compound looked like something from another planet, launch towers rising into blue sky, domes glinting in the sun, vehicles moving like they had purpose coded into their wheels. Elon met her outside the high bay. "Welcome to the frontier," he said. He handed her a visitor badge and a hard hat. "Let's go see what happens when you build the future from dust." For the next 72 hours, she shadowed real engineers doing real work. She watched heat tiles being fitted to the starship's underbelly. She stood 20 feet from a static fire test and felt the raw tremble of power. She ate ramen with systems teams at midnight. She asked more questions than most interns dared. And on the last night, after a long walk down the beach behind the facility, Elon found her sitting in the sand, staring at the stars. "Thinking of home?" he asked. She didn't look at him. "Thinking of my mom. She always said the sky was for dreamers." She was wrong, though. "No," he said quietly. "She was just early." Skye turned to him. "You really think someone like me can do this?" Elon shrugged. "You already are." The waves crashed softly. Skye leaned back on her hands, looked up, and whispered, "Then I won't stop. Ever." The morning after the test fire at Boca Chica, Skye woke up to the sound of gulls outside her window and sunlight pouring through the cheap hotel curtains like some kind of invitation. Her first instinct was confusion. Why was she warm, clean, rested? Then the memories flooded in. The roar of the engine. The rumble of the earth. Elon's quiet words on the beach. And suddenly, she sat upright, heart racing. She was here. Really here. Not as a tourist, not as a curiosity, but as someone they had trusted enough to bring inside. She didn't waste time. She dressed in the simple black SpaceX polo Letitia had given her, tied her hair back, and grabbed her notebook. The team was already gathering at the high bay when she arrived. Elon was there, along with 2 directors and a few engineers she hadn't met yet. She kept her distance, but Letitia spotted her and waved her over. "Big day," she said. "We've got a full systems review, and Elon wants you to sit in." "Me?" Sky asked, instantly feeling the weight of that question. Letitia nodded. "You earned this. Don't freeze." The meeting took place inside a glass-walled room that overlooked the main floor of the hangar. Blueprints were projected on a digital wall, cycling through layers of code, schematics, and sensor data. Elon stood at the front, pointing out a section of the new Starship variant. "We've improved RCS stability, but we're still dealing with thruster lag. This is where I want ideas, simple, dumb, brilliant, doesn't matter. If it works, it wins." The room fell quiet as ideas were tossed around. Engineers spoke in clipped, fast sentences, throwing equations and acronyms like darts. Sky scribbled furiously, trying to keep up. Then, as the conversation circled back on itself, Elon pointed toward her. "Sky, you've been quiet. Thoughts?" Her breath caught. Everyone turned. She looked at the diagram on the screen again, hands shaking slightly. "The lag might not just be mechanical," she said slowly. "If you're using a loop delay between sensor input and actuator output, there could be a propagation timing issue. Even a few milliseconds can mess up RCS corrections at high velocity." One of the engineers leaned forward. "What's your fix?" "Run a predictive control algorithm parallel to the main response loop," she said, surprising even herself. "Let it simulate thrust corrections 1 frame ahead using stored patterns. It doesn't have to be perfect, just fast." Elon blinked once. "That's actually interesting." Letitia looked like she was trying not to grin. "We can model that," another engineer said. "Shouldn't take more than a day to test in sim." The meeting moved on, but Sky barely heard the rest. Her heart was pounding so hard it drowned out everything. She'd spoken up. She hadn't embarrassed herself. She'd added something. Afterward, Letitia clapped her on the shoulder. "You're going to fit in here just fine." Elon passed by a few minutes later and gave a nod. "Nice work." Just those 2 words. But they stuck. That evening, after the shift ended, the team headed to a local beach bar for burgers and cheap drinks. Sky went along, nervous but curious. She sat next to a woman who introduced herself as Camila, lead on the heat shield program. "So you're the intern who almost broke the sim model," she said with a laugh. "Didn't mean to," Sky mumbled. Relax," Camila said. "You were right. We all saw it." They ate under string lights while the ocean murmured nearby, and for the first time in her life, Sky felt like she was part of something that didn't require her to hide who she was. No one here cared that she didn't come from MIT or that she hadn't even finished high school. They only cared that she could think. That she could see a problem and attack it. That she asked the right questions. A few days later, back in LA, she received her first direct deposit from the internship account. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more than she'd ever had in one place before. Carol helped her set up a checking account, and they stood in line at the bank together while Sky tried to hide how nervous she was. "You've got this," Carol said. "I'm proud of you." Sky grinned. "You're gonna make me cry in front of the security guard." With the money, Sky did 3 things. First, she bought herself a new pair of boots, sturdy, waterproof, the kind of thing you wear when you know you're going places. Second, she enrolled in an online GED course. Elon had told her education was a tool, not a gate. Still, she wanted to catch up. To fill the gaps. To prove to herself that she could learn everything she'd missed. And third, she bought a used telescope. A small one, scratched and second-hand. She set it up behind the shelter and spent hours alone staring at the stars, tracing constellations, whispering facts under her breath like they were prayers. "That's Vega," she'd say. "And Altair. That's the summer triangle. You're in the northern hemisphere looking back in time." She started tutoring a few of the other girls in the shelter, too, quietly, just the ones who showed interest. One night, she caught a shy 12-year-old named Brianna reading her propulsion book. "You want to learn?" Sky asked. Brianna nodded, wide-eyed. So they started meeting every Sunday in the shelter's kitchen. It wasn't just about equations. It was about showing someone else that stars weren't off-limits. Then one day, Elon messaged her again. Just a single line. "Got a challenge. Meet me in Hawthorne." She didn't hesitate. The new idea was bold, even for Elon. He called it SkyPod. A modular, stackable, solar-powered microshelter designed for rapid deployment in urban areas. "I want to change how we deal with homelessness," he said. "Not with handouts, but with engineering." Sky blinked. "That was your idea?" "You inspired it," he said simply. "You and the question you asked me. Leftovers. That stuck." He showed her sketches, early 3D models, feasibility reports. "I want you on this. You know both sides of it, the tech and the survival. Help me design something that matters." Sky stared at the hologram of the pod, a sleek, hexagonal capsule with fold-out panels, storage, ventilation, insulation. It looked like something from a sci-fi film. But it wasn't fiction. "I'm in," she said. "Whatever it takes." "Good," Elon replied. "Let's build something that makes people stop and rethink everything." And just like that, her story bent again, not away from space, but towards something just as vast. A mission to engineer dignity, one shelter at a time. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind unlike anything Sky had ever experienced. Suddenly, her days were packed with calls, video meetings, CAD modeling sessions, and hands-on workshops at SpaceX's Hawthorne facility. The SkyPod project wasn't just a design exercise, it was a mission. Elon's vision was to create something affordable, scalable, and sustainable, but above all, something that restored a sense of dignity to people who had lost everything. Sky poured her heart into every detail. She sketched layouts, considered materials, and drew from her own experience living on the streets to highlight what really mattered: privacy, safety, warmth, and a little bit of hope. In one session, she explained how simple things made a huge difference: a soft but sturdy mattress, a lock that actually worked, an air vent positioned to block noise yet allow airflow. The engineers listened, sometimes surprised. "I never thought of it like that," one said. They ran through dozens of design iterations. The pod had to be light enough to transport easily but durable enough to withstand harsh weather. Solar panels needed to power LED lights, charging ports, and a small fan without adding bulk. Modular panels folded out to expand the living space, and the whole unit could be stacked or clustered to form microcommunities. But the real challenge wasn't just engineering, it was skepticism. At every stage, Sky faced questions. How do you ensure safety against vandalism? What about sanitation? How do we get these into the hands of people who need them without red tape? Each question reminded her of nights spent sleeping on cold concrete, dodging hostile strangers and city patrols. She fought to keep the human side front and center. One afternoon, Elon invited her into a meeting with the product strategy team. "We're thinking beyond just the pod," he said. "Imagine a network, clusters of pods with shared facilities, solar-powered community hubs, access to resources. It's not just shelter, it's rebuilding neighborhoods." Sky nodded, her mind racing. Could this be more than just survival? Could it be rebirth? At the shelter, Carol noticed the change too. Sky was quieter, but there was a new light in her eyes. She still came back with stories of rocket parts and design reviews, but now she talked about Skypod plans and community impact. One evening, Sky sat with Brianna and a few other kids, showing them the basic CAD models on her laptop. "You can design anything," she told them. "You just have to believe it's possible." Brianna's eyes sparkled. "I want to build rockets," she whispered. Sky smiled. "And you will." But not everything was easy. Sometimes, she felt out of place, an imposter in a room full of engineers with degrees and experience. Her lack of formal schooling gnawed at her. She spent late nights reading textbooks and watching tutorials, racing to catch up. Yet, each setback made her more determined. One day, Elon stopped by her workstation. "How's the GED coming?" he asked. "Slow," she admitted. "But steady." "Good," he said. "Education isn't a straight path. It's a ladder with rungs you choose." Then came the first prototype build. SpaceX's fabrication team worked closely with her and Letitia, turning 3D models into tangible pods. Sky watched as sheet metal was cut and folded, solar cells wired, insulation layered inside. When the first pod was complete, Elon arranged a test in a nearby empty lot. The pod was loaded onto a trailer and driven over uneven terrain. The team watched anxiously as it bounced and rolled. When it emerged undamaged, cheers broke out. Sky ran her hand along the smooth exterior, feeling pride swell in her chest. But it wasn't about trophies. It was about what came next, getting the pods into the real world. Elon's team connected with local nonprofits and city officials, navigating the tricky politics of housing crises. Sky joined meetings, often the only person who had lived homeless herself. Her voice carried weight. She told stories that no data could capture. "It's not enough to drop shelters," she said. "People need connection, respect, access. Otherwise, it's just another form of invisibility." Slowly, they began pilot programs in a few neighborhoods. Sky helped coordinate deliveries, met residents, and listened. Some people were skeptical at first, used to broken promises and empty gestures. But when they stepped inside the pods, felt the warmth, the lock on the door, the little shelf to keep a book, they started to hope. Sky visited one night with Carol. A man named James greeted them, his eyes tired but curious. "This changes everything," he said, stepping inside. "I never thought a place like this was possible." That moment hit Sky harder than any rocket launch. It wasn't just engineering or tech. It was humanity. Elon checked in regularly, always pushing the team to think bigger. "If we can put people on Mars," he said, "we can put people in homes here on Earth." Sky knew the journey wasn't over. There would be setbacks, red tape, critics, and failures. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had a purpose. A family at SpaceX. A community at the shelter. And a dream as vast as the sky itself. One night, alone in her small room at the shelter, she looked at the telescope and then at the half-finished Skypod model on her desk. She whispered, "This is just the beginning." And for the first time, she believed it was true. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The real test of Skypod wasn't in the clean halls of SpaceX or the buzz of design meetings, it was in the gritty reality of the streets. After months of prototypes, plans, and hopeful pilots, the first official Skypod units arrived at a designated lot in downtown Los Angeles. It wasn't a glamorous location, cracked pavement, graffiti-tagged walls, the faint smell of exhaust and forgotten fast food. But it was real. Sky stood with Carol, Letitia, and a handful of local outreach workers as the pods were unloaded from trucks. People gathered, some curious, some wary, others resigned. Sky's stomach twisted with nerves. This was where her life had once been, the very place she'd struggled to survive. She scanned the crowd and saw faces marked by hardship but alive with quiet resilience. James, the man she'd met before, was there. So was Brianna, now accompanied by her mother. They all watched as Sky and the team unlocked the pod doors and showed the features: fold-out beds, secure storage, solar-powered lights, ventilation systems. "It's like a little house," a woman murmured. Sky wanted to hug her. Then the challenges began. Not everyone wanted the pods. Some feared theft or vandalism. Others worried about city fines or forced evictions. The local police made rounds, skeptical of this new approach. Sky had anticipated resistance, but seeing it up close was different. One evening, a group of men approached the pod area. They weren't hostile but clearly protective of their turf. Sky stepped forward, heart pounding. "We're here to help," she said simply. "This is a place to keep safe. To rebuild." After tense conversation and the introduction of outreach workers they trusted, the men agreed to a tentative truce. Sky realized this wasn't just about shelter. It was about trust. Over the following weeks, Sky visited daily, listening, fixing broken locks, sharing hot meals donated by a local church. She became a familiar face, a link between two worlds, the tech-driven dream and the harsh realities of survival. Meanwhile, inside SpaceX, the engineers scrambled to address feedback from the field. A solar panel was stolen. A vent was blocked. Someone tried to break in. Each problem felt like a personal failure to Sky, but Elon reminded her gently, every mission faces turbulence. What matters is how you adapt. They redesigned locks to be more secure, installed sensors to alert outreach teams, and improved community training on maintenance. Meanwhile, Sky continued her GED studies, balancing nights with online classes and days in the field. Carol helped by babysitting Brianna when Sky worked late. Their friendship deepened, and Sky began to open up about her fears: fear of falling back, of never escaping the cycle. One cold night, a sudden storm drenched the pods. Despite waterproofing, a few units leaked, and some residents were forced to find shelter elsewhere. Sky and Letitia worked through the night, handing out blankets and fixing damage as best they could. Exhausted, Sky sat on the curb, tears mixing with rain. "Why do you keep fighting?" Letitia asked softly. Sky looked up. "Because I've been where they are. Because I know how it feels to have nowhere." Letitia smiled through the rain. "Then you're the right person." A turning point came when a local news crew visited. Sky agreed to be interviewed, sharing her story from homeless girl to engineer. The coverage was raw and heartfelt, drawing attention and donations. Suddenly, SkyPod was more than an experiment, it was a movement. Volunteers arrived, eager to help build more pods and support residents. City officials took notice and began discussing policy changes. But progress wasn't linear. One night, a fire broke out in a cluster of pods, likely caused by a faulty charging cable. Sky and the team rushed in, coordinating with firefighters and ensuring no one was hurt. The blaze destroyed several units and shook everyone's confidence. Sky blamed herself, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing her. But Elon's words echoed: failure isn't defeat. It's data. Together, they rebuilt faster and stronger. They instituted strict safety protocols and launched workshops for residents on electrical safety. Through it all, Sky grew. She learned to balance hope with realism, empathy with pragmatism. Her leadership blossomed as she navigated the complex intersection of technology, human need, and bureaucracy. The neighborhood started to change. People who once hid in shadows began to smile, share stories, and rebuild connections. Brianna started school full-time, inspired by Sky's journey. One afternoon, as Sky helped a resident fix a solar panel, she looked around, the pods, the gardens volunteers planted, the laughter echoing off once-forgotten walls. This was more than a shelter. It was a home. And it was only the beginning. The city's summer heat was relentless, but nothing compared to the storm brewing inside Sky's mind. Despite the small victories with SkyPod, resistance grew louder. Local politicians questioned the project's funding, neighbors complained about increased foot traffic, and some media outlets cast doubt on whether a tech company could solve such a deep-rooted issue. Sky found herself sitting through endless meetings, defending the pods, explaining their purpose, and confronting the skepticism she'd never expected. It was exhausting. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling city council hearing, Sky sat on a bench outside the chamber, her head heavy with doubt. Carol found her there, offering a bottle of water and a quiet smile. "You okay?" she asked. Sky shook her head. "I don't know if I'm cut out for this." "The tech part?" "Sure. But the politics, the people, it's complicated." Carol nodded. "You're not alone. None of us are. But remember why you started." Sky looked up, the words sinking in. The memories of nights spent in rain-soaked alleyways, the hunger gnawing at her stomach, the cold that settled deep in her bones, that was why she kept fighting. That was why this project mattered. Back at the shelter, the atmosphere shifted. A group of activists opposed to SkyPod organized protests, arguing the pods enabled homelessness rather than solving it. Flyers appeared, bearing slogans like, "Tech won't fix poverty," and "Shelters not silicon." Sky understood the frustration, she'd felt it herself. But she also knew the pods were a start, a tangible way to help now while bigger systemic changes were debated. Elon reached out with support. "You're in the eye of the storm," he said over a late-night video call. "Hold steady. Innovation always meets resistance." One evening, as Sky walked through the pod community, she saw familiar faces gathered around a small fire pit. Brianna ran up, waving a drawing she'd made. A cluster of SkyPods surrounded by smiling families and green trees. "Look, Sky. This is our future." Sky smiled, her heart swelling. That was the future she wanted to build. But then came the crisis that nearly broke everything. A severe heatwave struck Los Angeles. Temperatures soared above 110 degrees. The pods, designed to be energy efficient, struggled to keep cool. Residents suffered. Calls flooded in reporting heat exhaustion, headaches, and dehydration. Sky sprang into action, coordinating with local health services and volunteers. They distributed water, fans, and cooling packs. Engineers worked around the clock to retrofit the pods with better ventilation and shading panels. One night, Sky received a panicked call from James. "My neighbors passed out. We need help." Sky rushed to the scene with a volunteer team. They administered first aid until paramedics arrived. The incident shook her. Despite all the progress, she realized how fragile their solution still was. It was a sobering lesson in humility and urgency. In the days that followed, Sky hosted workshops teaching residents how to stay safe during extreme weather and how to maintain their pods. She also began collaborating with climate experts to design next-generation pods better suited for heat waves and wildfires. The city's attitude began to shift. Media coverage highlighted the crisis response, praising the project's adaptability. Some politicians softened, supporting additional funding. But the battle was far from over. One night, as she closed up the shelter, Sky found a note slipped under the door: "You don't belong here. Leave before it's too late." Fear and anger surged through her. But so did determination. She wasn't about to let threats silence her. Instead, she shared the note with her team and community, sparking conversations about safety and solidarity. Volunteers increased patrols, and local businesses joined in to create safe zones. Sky realized leadership wasn't just about innovation, it was about resilience, courage, and standing firm in the face of adversity. Through it all, she kept returning to her telescope at night, finding solace in the stars. She reminded herself that every great journey faced darkness before dawn. And as the city heated up and tensions flared, Sky held on to a simple truth: change was never easy, but it was worth fighting for. The storm would pass. And when it did, SkyPod and its community would still be standing, stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. Just when Sky thought she had weathered the worst, a new challenge arose that no amount of engineering or grit could have prepared her for: bureaucracy. The SkyPod initiative had gained enough traction to attract attention beyond the city limits, but that also meant navigating a labyrinth of regulations, permits, and red tape. At a meeting with county officials, Sky found herself facing a wall of questions about zoning laws, safety codes, and liability. "Your pods don't meet building code," one official said flatly. "How can you guarantee sanitation? Fire safety? Security?" Sky tried to answer, drawing on the data they'd gathered during the pilot, but the officials remained unconvinced. She felt the familiar sting of invisibility, the dismissal she'd known all her life when she was homeless and voiceless. She left the meeting with more questions than answers and a growing sense of frustration. Back at the shelter, Carol noticed the weight settling into Sky's shoulders. "You don't have to do this alone," she reminded her gently. Sky nodded, but she knew this was bigger than any one person. If SkyPod was going to survive and scale, it needed allies. So, she set out to build bridges. One of her first unexpected allies was Maria, a city council member initially skeptical of the project. After a tour of the pods and conversations with residents, Maria's perspective shifted. "This isn't just a shelter," she admitted during a public forum. "It's a lifeline." Maria began championing SkyPod at City Hall, helping to cut through bureaucratic delays. Meanwhile, local nonprofits, faith groups, and business owners formed a coalition to support the initiative, providing services like counseling, job training, and healthcare right at the pod sites. Sky was amazed at the power of collaboration. At the same time, Elon connected Sky with engineers at Tesla who specialized in energy storage and sustainable materials. They offered expertise that led to improvements in the pod's battery systems and insulation. One late night, Sky stood in the workshop surrounded by engineers tweaking solar panels and running simulations. She realized how far she'd come, from a homeless girl hungry enough to ask for leftovers, to someone shaping technology that could change lives. But the real transformation was in the community. At a neighborhood meeting, a group of residents volunteered to form a pod council, taking responsibility for maintenance and safety. Brianna, now confident and thriving in school, led a youth group organizing cleanups and art projects. These grassroots efforts gave SkyPod a heartbeat beyond hardware. Yet, challenges persisted. Funding was always tight, and critics still voiced concerns. One morning, a local newspaper ran an editorial questioning whether technology could truly address homelessness or if it was just a flashy distraction from systemic problems. Sky read the article with a mix of frustration and resolve. She understood the criticisms; they came from a place of pain and skepticism, but she also believed deeply in the power of tangible change. That afternoon, she addressed the criticism head-on in a community meeting. "SkyPod isn't the whole solution," she said. "But it's a start. A step toward giving people dignity and hope. We need tech, policy, compassion, all working together." The crowd nodded, some clapping softly. Later, Maria approached her. "You're not just building pods," she said. "You're building trust. That trust opened doors." Federal grants arrived, allowing for expansion. Media stories humanized the residents, shifting public perception. Corporate partners joined to provide job opportunities. And Sky found herself invited to speak at conferences, sharing her story and the lessons of SkyPod. Through it all, she never forgot the nights on the streets, the hunger, the fear. They fueled her. One evening, Elon called with an idea: "What if we take SkyPod global?" Refugee camps, disaster zones, anywhere people need a safe place fast. Sky's mind raced. The potential was staggering. She agreed immediately. But before they could scale internationally, they had to prove SkyPod's impact locally. Data collection became a priority, tracking health outcomes, employment rates, community engagement. Early results were promising, showing reduced hospital visits and improved well-being. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Sky felt a real sense of momentum. As she looked out over the pod community one warm evening, children playing and neighbors chatting, she thought about how a simple question, "Can I eat your leftovers?" had sparked this movement. It was a reminder that even the smallest acts of courage and connection could ignite change. Sky knew the road ahead would be long and full of obstacles. But she also knew she wasn't walking it alone. Together, they were building more than shelters, they were building hope. The momentum was building, but with growth came new challenges, ones that pushed Sky to the edge of her endurance and belief. Just as the expanded SkyPod pilot program gained traction, a legal battle erupted. A coalition of local landlords filed a lawsuit claiming the pods devalued property and encouraged loitering. Their attorneys wielded zoning laws and neighborhood covenants like weapons, threatening to shut down the entire project. Sky sat in the cramped meeting room of a downtown courthouse, flanked by her legal team and a handful of residents who came to show support. The tension was palpable. Across the room, the opposing lawyers argued with cold precision. Sky felt the weight of every skeptical glance, every whispered doubt. It was a fight she had never imagined she'd face, not in court, but in her quest to provide a simple, safe place to sleep. After the hearing, she stepped outside into the bright sunlight, trying to steady her shaking hands. Carol found her first, wrapping her arms around Sky in a fierce hug. "You're doing the right thing," she said firmly. Sky nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I just wish it felt easier." The days that followed were a blur of legal filings, media coverage, and community meetings. SkyPod supporters rallied, organizing fundraisers and letter-writing campaigns. Residents shared their stories publicly, how SkyPod had saved lives, restored dignity, and sparked hope. Sky found herself speaking at rallies, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. Each story shared was a reminder that this wasn't just about pods or policies, it was about people. One evening, after a long day of advocacy, Sky sat on the rooftop of a donated building, gazing at the city skyline. The twinkling lights reminded her of stars she'd once watched through a cracked window at the shelter. Somewhere out there, millions of others were fighting their own battles. She thought about Brianna, now a confident teenager leading youth workshops, and the faces of the residents who had become like family. They were counting on her. Around that time, an unexpected ally emerged. Marcus, a wealthy real estate developer known for controversial projects. At first, Sky was wary. His name came with baggage, and his industry wasn't known for compassion. But Marcus surprised her by showing genuine interest in SkyPod's mission. He proposed a partnership, repurposing vacant lots in his developments for SkyPod clusters, integrating affordable housing with innovative community spaces. The idea sparked debate among her team. Was it a genuine opportunity or a PR stunt? Sky decided to meet with Marcus. In a sleek office filled with architectural models, they talked for hours. Marcus admitted he'd never considered homelessness beyond statistics until he met one of SkyPod's residents at a fundraiser. "It changed how I see things," he said quietly. "I want to help make a real difference." Trust was hard-earned, but slowly, Sky saw potential in the alliance. Together, they envisioned mixed-use developments where SkyPods could coexist with permanent housing, creating integrated communities rather than isolated pockets. The collaboration attracted attention from city planners and social innovators. Meanwhile, Sky's team continued refining the pods based on feedback, adding smart sensors for safety, upgrading insulation for colder climates, and creating communal spaces for education and support. The narrative around Skypod began to shift from controversy to innovation. The lawsuit stretched on, but public support swelled. One pivotal hearing saw a group of residents testify about how Skypod had changed their lives, from James, who found steady work, to Brianna, who dreamed of college. Their voices resonated, humanizing the fight. Finally, the court ruled in favor of Skypod, affirming its place as a legal and vital part of the community. The victory was bittersweet, battles ahead remained, but the ruling was a milestone. Sky allowed herself a rare moment of relief, knowing the fight had made the project stronger and more visible. That night, she stood on the shelter's roof, the city alive beneath her feet. The journey from hungry girl on the streets to changemaker had been far from easy, but every obstacle had forged her resilience. She thought about the future, expansion to other cities, global impact, endless challenges and victories. She whispered to the stars, "We're just getting started." And in that moment, Sky believed it with all her heart. Sky felt the weight of a crossroads bearing down on her like the summer heat that blanketed the city. Skypod had grown beyond anything she could have dreamed. What started as a few makeshift shelters had blossomed into a movement that drew attention from philanthropists, tech innovators, and politicians alike. But with growth came complexity, and she found herself pulled in directions she hadn't anticipated. The line between the project's original mission and the pressures of scalability blurred, and Sky feared losing sight of what mattered most, the people. One afternoon, as she walked through the newest Skypod community in a suburban neighborhood, she noticed signs of strain. Some residents struggled with newfound rules designed to maintain order. Tensions flared between newcomers and longtime inhabitants. The grassroots spirit that had fueled Skypod's early success felt threatened by bureaucracy and expectations. Sky sat with Carol and Letitia, their expressions heavy with concern. "We're at a tipping point," Letitia said softly. "If we don't listen, we risk alienating the very people we're trying to help." Sky nodded, feeling the familiar ache of responsibility. That night, she pored over feedback reports, resident interviews, and community meeting notes. It was clear, growth required more than just physical pods. It required renewed commitment to empathy, flexibility, and empowerment. Sky convened a summit, inviting residents, outreach workers, city officials, and tech partners. The goal was to reclaim the project's heart while charting a path forward. The gathering was raw and honest. Residents spoke openly about struggles with rules, fears of losing autonomy, and hopes for a future beyond temporary shelter. Sky listened intently, sometimes bracing against the sting of criticism, other times buoyed by stories of resilience and hope. Together, they drafted a new charter emphasizing community governance, personalized support, and adaptability. The process reignited Sky's passion. She realized leadership meant making space for voices, even when it was hard. At the same time, external pressures mounted. A major investor expressed impatience for faster expansion and higher returns, pressuring Sky to prioritize scalability over individualized care. She faced tough conversations about balancing innovation with integrity. Elon offered guidance, reminding her that true progress wasn't measured just in numbers but in lives changed. Meanwhile, Brianna, now a confident young woman, emerged as a powerful advocate. She organized youth-led workshops and shared her story at events, inspiring others. Her presence reminded Sky that the next generation was watching and counting on them to get it right. As the project adjusted course, Sky also had to confront personal crossroads. A rare invitation came to speak at an international summit on homelessness and innovation. It was an honor, but accepting meant time away from the community she'd built. Torn between the global stage and local roots, Sky sought advice from Carol. "Sometimes, to lead, you have to step back to see the bigger picture," Carol said gently. Sky decided to go, hoping to bring back fresh ideas and new allies. The summit was overwhelming, bright lights, powerful voices, endless panels. But Sky found her footing by sharing the unvarnished story of Skypod, the victories, failures, and human faces behind the headlines. Her speech resonated, earning invitations to collaborate on projects worldwide. Yet, amid the applause, Sky felt a pang of longing for the neighborhood streets, the small victories of daily life, and the people who made the work meaningful. Returning home, she committed to bridging local care with global innovation. She and Elon brainstormed ways to create adaptable skypod models suited to different cultures and climates. But the biggest lesson was clear: technology alone wasn't the answer. Connection, trust, and respect were just as vital. Back in Los Angeles, Sky found renewed energy in the community's resilience. A mural went up celebrating their journey, a vibrant tapestry of faces, stars, and hope. Standing before it, Sky reflected on how far they'd come, from a desperate question whispered to a billionaire to a beacon of possibility. The crossroads were still there, but now Sky faced them with confidence. She knew the path forward wasn't straight or easy, but it was theirs to shape. And whatever the future held, she was ready to meet it head-on. The coming months tested Sky in ways she never anticipated. Skypod had become a symbol of hope and innovation, but with that spotlight came new pressures, doubts, and challenges that threatened to unravel everything she had worked for. One morning, Sky awoke to devastating news: a fire had broken out in one of the Skypod communities. Though no lives were lost, several pods were destroyed, and dozens of residents were displaced. The cause was unclear, and rumors swirled. Some blamed negligence, others suggested foul play. Sky's heart sank. She immediately coordinated with emergency responders, volunteers, and local shelters to ensure everyone was safe and had temporary housing. As she walked through the charred remains, she felt a wave of helplessness. The pods, once vibrant and full of life, now stood as blackened skeletons. Questions gnawed at her: had they done enough to protect the community? Was the project too fragile to withstand setbacks? The media was relentless, some outlets framing the fire as a failure of the Skypod model. Critics seized the moment to call for shutting down the program altogether. Sky knew that one incident could undo years of progress if she didn't act swiftly and transparently. She called an emergency meeting with her team and community leaders. "We will rebuild," she declared, voice steady despite the weight in her chest. "And we will learn from this. Our community is stronger than this fire." The response was immediate. Donations poured in, volunteers mobilized, and engineers worked around the clock to design fire-resistant pods with improved safety features. The disaster became a catalyst for innovation rather than defeat. But rebuilding was about more than structures, it was about healing. Sky organized counseling services for residents traumatized by the fire and held community gatherings to rebuild trust and solidarity. Brianna took the lead with the youth, helping them process their fears and channel their energy into creative projects like a Phoenix mural, symbolizing resilience. Throughout it all, Sky leaned on Elon's guidance. He shared stories of SpaceX setbacks and the importance of embracing failure as part of progress. "It's not how hard you fall," he said during a late-night call, "it's how you rise that defines you." Those words anchored Sky. She began to see the fire not as the end but as a turning point, one that demanded courage, transparency, and renewed commitment. Simultaneously, Sky faced personal trials. The stress of the disaster and public scrutiny strained her relationships. Arguments with Carol grew more frequent as exhaustion clouded their patience. Letitia, grappling with burnout, considered stepping down from her role. Sky realized she had to take care of herself to lead effectively, a lesson learned through painful trial. She sought therapy and reconnected with friends she'd neglected, finding strength in vulnerability. At the same time, the project's funding faced uncertainty. Some donors hesitated, worried about risks. Sky and her team crafted a transparent recovery plan, sharing detailed safety upgrades and community support initiatives. Their openness restored confidence, turning skeptics into supporters. The rebuilding phase also inspired new partnerships. A university engineering program offered to test cutting-edge materials for the pods. Local fire departments collaborated on safety protocols. SkyPod became a laboratory for innovation and community resilience. Months later, as the new pods were installed, a grand reopening celebration brought together residents, volunteers, city officials, and supporters. Sky stood before the crowd, humbled and energized. She shared the story of the fire and the journey since, of loss, healing, and hope. "We are not defined by what happens to us," she said, "but by how we respond. Together, we rise." Applause filled the air, faces bright with pride and determination. Brianna unveiled the Phoenix mural, a vibrant symbol of their shared strength. For Sky, the test of faith reaffirmed the heart of her mission: people over projects, community over convenience. The fire had threatened to break them, but instead, it forged them into something stronger, united, resilient, and ready for the future. SkyPod's visible progress masked a growing, unseen battle that gnawed at Sky's spirit and threatened the very foundation of her work. Despite the outward successes, SkyPod's residents still faced the harsh realities of trauma, addiction, and mental health struggles, issues that no technology alone could solve. Sky realized that while the pods offered shelter and safety, healing required deeper, more nuanced support. One evening, after a long day visiting various pods, Sky sat quietly with James, a resident who had recently relapsed after 6 months of sobriety. His story was heartbreaking, years of struggle punctuated by small victories and devastating setbacks. "I want to get clean," James said, voice cracking, "but it feels like the world's against me." Sky felt the familiar ache of helplessness but refused to give up. She knew this battle was bigger than infrastructure. She began pushing to integrate comprehensive mental health and addiction services directly into SkyPod communities. The challenge was immense: limited funding, stigma, and a shortage of trained professionals made progress slow and frustrating. She partnered with local clinics and nonprofits, bringing counselors, peer support groups, and addiction specialists on site. Slowly, trust grew. Residents who had once been isolated found community, and those who felt invisible began to speak out. Brianna helped by organizing peer mentorship programs, creating safe spaces where youth could share their struggles without judgment. Yet, setbacks continued. Sky watched friends relapse, disputes flare, and old wounds reopen. Each incident tested her resolve. The media spotlight also shifted, with some critics arguing SkyPod was a band-aid that ignored root causes of homelessness and addiction. Sky wrestled with these criticisms, knowing they held truth, but refusing to abandon the people depending on her. In private moments, she questioned if she was enough. Elon noticed her struggles during a video call. "You're carrying more than you should," he said gently. "It's okay to ask for help." Encouraged, Sky began building a dedicated wellness team within SkyPod, a group trained to provide trauma-informed care and crisis intervention. She also reached out to former residents who had rebuilt their lives, inviting them back as advisors and counselors. Their lived experience became invaluable, bridging gaps that professionals sometimes couldn't cross. Slowly, the community began to heal in ways beyond shelter. People found jobs, reconnected with families, and reclaimed dignity. Sky realized the true power of SkyPod was not the pods themselves, but the relationships and support woven around them. One afternoon, during a community event celebrating recovery milestones, Sky watched James accept a certificate for a job placement. Tears welled in her eyes. This was the real victory, small, hard-won moments of transformation. But Sky also understood the journey was ongoing. She knew that homelessness and addiction were complex, systemic issues requiring continuous effort and compassion. Sky's vision evolved into a holistic model, one that combined technology, community, and care. The unseen battle was far from over, but SkyPod's light burned brighter, illuminating paths for those who had once been lost in darkness. SkyPod had reached a critical turning point, and Sky knew it was time to take a leap of trust, both in herself and in the community she'd helped build. After years of trial, error, setbacks, and breakthroughs, she was preparing to launch the SkyPod Empowerment Initiative, a bold new program designed to give residents not only shelter but real ownership and agency over their futures. The idea had been seeded during one of the many community meetings. Residents expressed frustration with being passive recipients of aid. They wanted to be partners in shaping their environment, decisions, and lives. Inspired by their voices, Sky crafted a plan to transform SkyPod from a charity model into a cooperative community. The initiative involved training residents in leadership, governance, and entrepreneurship, encouraging them to run programs, manage resources, and develop skills that would carry them beyond temporary shelter. But launching such a program was risky. It challenged traditional nonprofit frameworks and demanded trust in people many society had marginalized. Some board members and donors were skeptical. Are they ready? They asked. Will it be sustainable? Sky understood their concerns but felt strongly this was the future. She remembered the question she'd asked herself on those cold nights: what if you suddenly lost everything and had no one by your side? This was her answer, not just to provide shelter, but to build resilience and independence. The first phase began with leadership workshops. Brianna, now a mentor, led sessions on communication, conflict resolution, and community organizing. She connected with other young people, igniting a spark of possibility. Sky watched with pride as residents stepped up, often tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. One afternoon, a resident named Maria shared her story. Once trapped in cycles of addiction and abuse, she now spearheaded a cooperative gardening project that provided fresh produce for the community. "This place saved me," Maria said, "but now I want to save others too." The project grew beyond expectations. Residents launched small businesses, a cafe, a thrift shop, an arts collective, using microgrants and mentorship from local entrepreneurs. SkyPod became a hub of creativity and enterprise. The cooperative governance model also took shape. Residents elected councils to make decisions about rules, safety, and programming. This shift was revolutionary. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about thriving together. But trust wasn't easy. Old wounds and distrust surfaced. Some residents struggled with newfound responsibilities, conflicts arose over resources and leadership styles. Sky facilitated tough conversations, reminding everyone that mistakes were part of growth. She shared her own struggles to encourage honesty and humility. Meanwhile, Sky faced personal challenges balancing her expanding role with her health and relationships. She leaned on Carol, whose steady presence grounded her. They took moments to recharge, quiet evenings talking about hopes, fears, and the journey ahead. Elon continued to support her vision, providing guidance and resources while respecting her autonomy. As the empowerment initiative matured, it caught the attention of social innovators and policymakers. Sky was invited to speak about SkyPod's cooperative model at national conferences, inspiring others to rethink how society addresses homelessness. But for Sky, the real reward was seeing residents stand tall with pride and purpose. During a community celebration marking the initiative's first anniversary, Sky looked around at the vibrant, bustling space filled with laughter, art, and life. Brianna took the stage, speaking eloquently about what SkyPod had meant to her, a place where she found her voice and her future. Sky felt tears well up. This was why she had asked that unforgettable question to Elon Musk so long ago: "Can I eat your leftovers?" It was more than a question about food, it was a plea for dignity, connection, and hope. And that question had changed everything. The leap of trust had paid off. Sky knew challenges still lay ahead, but with community, courage, and faith, anything was possible. Together, they had rewritten the narrative, not just of homelessness, but of what it meant to belong. Despite the soaring successes and the empowering momentum of the SkyPod Empowerment Initiative, shadows of doubt crept into Sky's mind, threatening to erode the foundation she had built. The intense public attention and growing expectations brought scrutiny and criticism from unexpected corners. One evening, after a long day filled with meetings and community outreach, Sky sat alone in her small apartment, scrolling through online forums and social media. Some comments were supportive, praising the project's innovation and heart. Others, however, were harsh, questioning her leadership, accusing her of naivety, or doubting the sustainability of Skypod. The weight of these words pressed on her chest like a physical burden. She wondered if she was setting people up for failure by raising hopes too high. The pressure intensified when a local journalist published an investigative piece highlighting several challenges within the community: relapses, interpersonal conflicts, and the slow pace of permanent housing placements. The article, while balanced, painted a stark picture that some readers interpreted as a failure. Sky's phone buzzed non-stop with calls from anxious donors and concerned partners. She had expected skepticism. After all, homelessness was a stubborn, systemic issue. But the personal attacks cut deeper than she anticipated. She questioned whether the leap of trust she'd taken was misplaced. Carol noticed the shift in Sky's energy and encouraged her to step back and reflect. "You're carrying the world on your shoulders, but you don't have to do it alone," Carol reminded her gently. Sky took a rare weekend off, retreating to a quiet cabin outside the city. Surrounded by nature's calm, she sifted through memories: the night sleeping under bridges, the day she first asked Elon Musk for help, the countless faces of people she'd met along the way. She realized that doubt was a natural companion on any journey worth taking. When she returned, Sky called a community meeting. She wanted to address the shadows openly. In a packed room filled with residents, volunteers, and staff, she shared her fears and the challenges ahead. "We are not perfect," she said, voice steady but vulnerable. "We stumble, we hurt, but we keep going because this is bigger than any one of us." The honesty broke down walls. Residents opened up about their struggles, frustrations, and hopes. Together, they brainstormed solutions: strengthening peer support, increasing mental health resources, and improving communication channels. Sky also invited external experts to provide training and guidance on trauma-informed care and conflict resolution. This willingness to face imperfections head-on reinvigorated the community. Sky realized that transparency and humility were powerful tools, not signs of weakness, but of true leadership. On a personal level, she leaned on Brianna more than ever. Brianna's youthful optimism and fierce determination reminded Sky why the fight mattered. "We've come too far to let fear win," Brianna said one afternoon, pulling Sky into a tight hug. Sky smiled, grateful for the unspoken bond between them. Meanwhile, Elon reached out with words of encouragement and shared his own experiences battling doubt and criticism in his ventures. "Remember, progress is messy," he told her. "The important thing is to keep learning and moving forward." That message stayed with Sky during the darkest moments. Slowly, the shadows began to lift, not because the problems disappeared, but because Sky and her community learned to face them together with courage and resilience. The journey was far from over, but the doubt that once threatened to paralyze Sky now fueled her determination to build a better future, one honest step at a time. The shadows of doubt and struggle gradually gave way to a pivotal moment, the turning point that would define not just Skypod's future but Sky's own transformation as a leader and human being. The months leading up to this moment had been fraught with tension, setbacks, and tireless effort, but Sky could feel the tide beginning to shift. The turning point came unexpectedly, during a community event held at the heart of the Skypod campus. The event was a celebration of resilience, marking the anniversary of the Empowerment Initiative's launch. Families, residents, volunteers, local officials, and supporters gathered under a canopy of string lights, the air alive with music, laughter, and the aroma of home-cooked food prepared by residents themselves. As Sky moved through the crowd, shaking hands and sharing smiles, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. This was the culmination of years of hard work and shared dreams. On stage, Brianna stepped forward, her voice clear and confident as she shared her journey, from a frightened homeless teenager to a community leader advocating for change. Her words resonated powerfully, drawing tears and applause. After Brianna's speech, Sky was invited to say a few words. She took a deep breath and spoke from the heart, acknowledging the challenges, the doubts, and the incredible strength of the community. "We have fallen, we have risen, and we have grown together," she said. "This turning point is not the end of our story, it is the beginning of a new chapter, one defined by hope, unity, and endless possibility." The crowd erupted in applause, but it was the moments after the speech that truly marked the turning point. A city council member approached Sky, offering full support to integrate SkyPod's model into the city's official homelessness strategy. Negotiations had been long and difficult, but this endorsement signaled a new era of partnership and legitimacy. In the weeks that followed, SkyPod's influence expanded beyond Los Angeles, inspiring similar initiatives in other cities. Sky found herself mentoring other leaders, sharing lessons learned from the front lines. On a personal level, the turning point brought clarity and peace. Sky embraced her evolving identity, not just as a founder and leader, but as a woman who had faced immense adversity and emerged stronger. She and Carol deepened their bond, building a life grounded in mutual respect and love. Brianna, now a recognized youth ambassador, continued to inspire, reminding Sky that the future belonged to those willing to believe and act. The turning point also revealed a deeper truth: change was never linear. It was messy, unpredictable, and often painful. But it was also beautiful and transformative. SkyPod had become more than a shelter, it was a testament to human resilience, the power of community, and the magic that happens when someone dares to ask a simple, desperate question. As Sky looked out over the vibrant community she helped nurture, she knew that the journey was far from over. But this turning point gave her the strength and vision to keep moving forward, toward a world where no one would ever have to ask, "Can I eat your leftovers?" again. As the sun set over the city skyline, casting a warm golden glow on the SkyPod community, Sky stood quietly near the new community garden, reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. From the cold streets where she once asked Elon Musk for leftovers to this thriving neighborhood of hope, growth, and resilience, her life had come full circle. The garden was a symbol, planted by residents, tended with care, and blossoming despite the harsh conditions it had faced. Much like SkyPod itself, it was a testament to the power of nurturing, patience, and belief. The past years had been filled with unimaginable highs and devastating lows, moments of crushing doubt and inspiring triumphs. Sky thought of Brianna, now a confident young woman leading youth outreach programs across the country. She thought of James, who had recently celebrated 2 years sober and was mentoring others through recovery. She thought of Maria, whose cooperative cafe had become a beacon of community pride and economic empowerment. And she thought of Elon Musk, whose unexpected kindness on that fateful day had ignited a spark that grew into a wildfire of change. Sky remembered the very first question she had asked him: "Can I eat your leftovers?" It was a simple, vulnerable plea that had opened doors, not just to food, but to possibility, dignity, and connection. That question, born from desperation, had changed everything, not just her own life, but the lives of thousands. Now, as she stood amidst the vibrant hum of SkyPod, she knew the greatest transformation wasn't in the pods or programs, but in the hearts and minds of those who believed in second chances. Sky reflected on the lessons learned, that love and community were the most powerful forces for change, that setbacks were not failures but opportunities to grow, that trust, once given, could become a foundation for incredible strength. She also understood that her journey was part of a larger story, one that society needed to continue writing together, with compassion, innovation, and relentless hope. As night fell, the community gathered for a final celebration marking SkyPod's official integration into the city's social services. Speeches were made, music played, and stories shared under the stars. Sky took the stage one last time, her voice steady and filled with emotion. "Life is full of surprises," she said, "but love will always lead the way. To everyone here, and those still searching for hope, know that your story is not over. We rise by lifting each other." The crowd erupted in cheers. As Sky stepped down, she was surrounded by hugs and tears, reminders that this was not an ending, but a new beginning. Later, alone for a moment, she looked up at the stars and whispered a silent thank you to the universe. Her journey from a homeless girl asking for leftovers to a leader shaping the future was proof that even the smallest questions could spark the biggest changes. And in that moment, Sky felt whole, ready to face whatever came next, armed with courage, love, and the unshakable belief that every life mattered. The story might have started with a desperate question, but it ended with a powerful message: no one is truly lost when a community chooses to see, to care, and to believe. And for Sky, that was everything. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?